The Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College presents Liberty Mail with the Student Fellows of Faith and Freedom.
Welcome to another episode of Liberty Mail with Aaron Jenks, and today we have a special guest, Grace Riley. Thank you so much for coming. Grace is a prominent kind of within the conservative movement. She works for Turning Point USA as an ambassador. She has her own Instagram account with, I think, like 20,000 followers, Conservative Grace. Go hit her up on Instagram, and I think on any other platforms, Twitter?
Twitter as well, and also get her at Conserve Grace.
Okay, and then so we were very excited to have her today, and mainly have her today as a guest because she was down at CPAC when Libby and I were also down at CPAC. So we're going to go through kind of the polling that we did, the results that we had. We had around 60 respondents, 70 respondents. And so we'll talk a little about and go through the answers and just share kind of our perspective on where the conservative movement is at and kind of what politicians are at the forefront of that.
Yeah, that sounds great, and CPAC was really, really great and cool to be at, and thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. Well, actually, first, before we hop into that, what was your favorite part about CPAC?
I think my favorite part must have been just seeing all of the enthusiasm within the conservative movement there. There were so many people there that were just so excited about the future of our country and just ready to kind of stand up and stand for freedom, which is always really good to see.
Yeah, there definitely was a ton of excitement, people, a ton of buzz, just like you walk in and the atmosphere.
Energy.
Yeah, energy. And especially on when Donald Trump spoke on Saturday, people just go crazy, berserk. They got special service in there. The whole place got locked down. And so it was
Yeah,
exciting.
That was very cool, and there were just a lot of really great speakers. I mean, where else can you go where you have that many speakers in either the government or just public figures? It was just a really cool place to be, and definitely a lot to learn there and a lot of really great speeches.
I agree. Here, so this hops into the first kind of topic on the poll, and the first question was, the future of conservatism is bright. And majority of people, so we did a kind of a litmus test of 0 to 10, 0 being saying no, 10 saying kind of yes, agreeing with it. And so majority of people either answered with a 7 or a 10, and it was overwhelming support of like 42%, saying that they thought the future of conservatism is bright, which I thought is very telling. And I had a lot of I opened up the polling to people outside of CPAC. So we have people either at the school here or anyone on social media that kind of saw the post. What is your take on the future of conservatism?
Yeah, so I would say, too, even in the poll, there are some that even disagree with that. And I think on that, the future of conservatism is bright if we make it bright. And I think that really is up to us and up to our generation, honestly, to stand up, stand for freedom, and to stand up for our values, really, in the culture that we're in. And Ronald Reagan once said that, America is the last stand of freedom on earth. And also, our freedom is always only one generation away from extinction. And we talk about those quotes a lot, but I think they really do stand true where the responsibility falls in the hands of the American people. And if we want the future of conservatism to be bright, it's up to us to stand up and make it bright. And I really think that we are doing that and that there are a lot of young people and just a lot of Americans in general that are either waking up or that are standing up for conservatism.
Yeah, I like that. Ronald Reagan quotes are always appreciated on Liberty Mail and beloved. When we look at kind of you say like leading as an example in the world, I really share that sentiment as like, okay, America comes first. We've had this history, long-standing history of providing freedoms and being the first kind of government that strayed away from, okay, we're not going to have tyranny within the government. We're going to have some separation between certain powers, and just our whole dynamic of how we set up our government was unique, and so we are a shining light on the hill. And so when we look at kind of conservatism within America, we say, okay, we want to keep what we know is going to be time-tested values, right? And so we will have change, but we have prudence when we do these changes. And so we will lead as an example, and we're not going to stay in the past, excuse me, but we will have prudence, and our decisions are going to be guided by faith. So it's not just unlimited freedom. So we know that we have to have some constraints in some areas.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, too, it's important for us to realize that if we as the conservative movement, decide to kind of sit back, stay comfortable, and just kind of be like, oh, everything looks like it's going bad. What can we even do? I think if we have that attitude and we don't do what we can to stand up, then the left will win. And we already see the left and Marxists are trying to take over the culture, are trying to take over our country. And really, again, that's where they will win if we let them win, if we just sit back. But we really have an opportunity, I think, to stand up for faith and for freedom and to share those values with our peers and the rest of our country.
Mm-hmm. And to that same point, I know that individuals like yourself, me or Libby, when you go to CPAC, you see tons of people our age, whether they're 18 to 25, and they're really getting into the movement. They're starting their own YouTube accounts, starting their own podcasts. And so they're spreading this conservative movement that's, I think, largely based on kind of Reagan conservatism. Mm. And so I totally agree with majority of this first one, that the future is bright because we have a lot of people that, like you said, waking up when we're moving forward. We understand that, okay, these time-tested values, morality is important in these values, and so we're going to move forward and push them. And so I'd hop into the second one because now that we know what we are fighting for, we know what we want to push, but who's going to be that leader? And it was interesting because at CPAC they do a straw poll of who will be the presidential candidate. And they had Trump winning at 52%, I believe. And then I don't know who... I
believe DeSantis was following Trump.
Okay, so DeSantis in second. Can't find a percent on that.
But those percentages were split among other people, so Trump really kind of crushed the poll.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if it's a great kind of representation of the conservative movement because, like we were saying before we started the podcast, that CPAC is so Trumpy, or at least CPAC brings in so many Trump supporters because for the past 8 years he's been constantly going and he's been making it kind of this theatrical event where it's excitement, as we said, like you walk into the building and there's a lot of energy. And so even on the poll, the percentages were skewed. On the no side, that people disagreed with this sentiment that Trump is the future of conservatism or represents conservatism. You had 7 people, 19%, sorry, excuse me, need some water, saying that no, so they definitely disagreed. And then we have some, about like 34%, 29 actually, saying that they do agree. Where do you kind of find yourself within this realm?
Yeah, well, I would say I'm not surprised that the movement seems to be divided on this, and I think that does run true across either at CPAC and just across the country, that people do seem to be divided either one way or the other, where maybe they want DeSantis or they want Trump or someone else. People really are divided. I would say that Trump does have a very big, strong base, so I think he does have a chance, and as we've seen through this poll, I think... Again, he has a big, strong base, but I don't necessarily think this specific poll was maybe a representation of the GOP or the conservative party as a whole in America. I think we're going to see as we go forward support go one way or another. So I think it'll be very interesting to see, but I don't think that we should, shy away from the fact that Trump really does have a lot of supporters, but also DeSantis does as well. So it'll be interesting to see what actually happens.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of survey that we put out, I think, is more telling of where more people stand, that, okay, we do have a broad distribution. And then it also makes me think that, okay, no matter where we're looking at to leaders, we kind of just want to win. The conservative movement just wants to win because we see this opposing values or lack of opposing values on the left. And so it's not really so much about, okay, we support Trump a ton, but it's like, can he win or can DeSantis win? And
I think that's a really good point, and that's, I think, what a lot of conservatives are kind of going back and forth with, deciding who has the best chance in the next election against Joe Biden. And I think again, and on this question, does Trump represent conservatism? I think he certainly, I wouldn't say he completely represents the ideology of conservatism, but he certainly carries a lot of those qualities and certainly is in a lot of ways leading the Republican Party in a certain direction. So I think he definitely, again, is a proven winner. I guess we'll see what happens as we move forward. But I think people definitely are looking for that winner, as you said.
Yeah, and one last thing. I think Trump gets so kind of tied into what conservatism is, at least in the past couple years, and other people's view is because, okay, Trump does represent sentiments of, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and individualism. And so I think those two ideals definitely get tied into conservatism all the time. But as like if you're a conservative scholar, or at least you're well read with either Russell Kirk or anyone, you understand that those sentiments kind of have arisen out of Americanism, and not really tied essentially to conservatism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's why he definitely isn't a cookie-cutter, perfect conservative by any means, but I think I would be kind of between where, yeah, maybe not in that way, but in other ways he certainly is leading that movement.
I agree. So let's go to the third one. President Biden has made my liberal friends more receptive to conservatism.
A lot of people in the middle here, it looks like.
Yeah, okay, so we have, it's majority of percent. The weighted average is 5.3, so like Grace said, a lot of people in the middle. But just in your own experience, have you seen this happen where President Biden's policies or just his presidency has made some of your moderate or liberal friends more receptive to conservative ideals?
I would say in my experience, yes, but also no. Just meaning that yes, because Biden's policies have been so radical and a lot of them haven't gone well, and we've seen a lot of problems arise through his presidency. I think because of that and through the results that people are seeing, they're kind of experiencing firsthand Biden's policies, and they're realizing really that he maybe isn't the best leader. But on top of that, I think that the media still, again, is going strong in defense of Biden and being biased. So I think people are still kind of in between and not knowing who to believe, what to think, because it really is hard to find the truth these days in the news. So I think a lot of people that are maybe in the middle are still kind of, I guess, seeing what they think. But I think for sure Biden's policies alone and the results of them have at least opened some people's eyes.
Yeah, to your one point that, okay, a lot of times maybe no, because maybe it's just like how polarized politics have become.
Exactly. And that's important to consider that, yeah, we are very polarized, so it's a lot harder for people to go one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. But I know in my experience, at least, this question is not, I found it hard. I kind of reworded it a couple times, and like receptive I thought was the at least most honest, like, okay, what we're trying to get at here. But in my own experience with friends, it's not that, like, they're not becoming conservatives, but they're like, okay, these policies that I know are democratic policies, they're not either working or maybe they don't have time to work. I don't know. But
well, and it's also understanding the why of that. Like, why aren't these policies working? And I don't necessarily know that I'd say that that's all there yet in people's analysis of what's going on as well.
But they just see a down kind of decline in the country, and they're like, okay, well, this wasn't happening a couple years back, so maybe I should be more understanding or receptive to conservatism.
I think, too, though, it's not necessarily making them fans of Trump either, for example, though. They're not saying, oh, well, Trump was better. That's a lot of Trump's base. Now, and I hope, too, that this does open more people's eyes just because, again, it is the reality we're living in. So I hope that more people open their eyes to what's going on and that we can, vote in 22 and 24, and that'll go well.
And this leads into the fourth question, which is almost a misconception of conservatism, in my view, is that, okay, these policies have shifted focus mainly on to the economy. And as conservatives, we definitely promote just a free economic system, and we favor that over any other system because we know it is historically accurate and works. But the fourth question is, conservatism says the economy is more important than culture. And so this is where, when we flip back to the other question, we're like, okay, I'm going to be more receptive to conservative ideas because I see the economy going down. And then a lot of the times I think that either moderates or people on the left will go, okay, conservatism, they just care about the economy. They're not interested in social issues or anything else. And so what do you think about conservatism says the economy is more important than the culture?
Well, I would say that they're definitely both very important and that they both drive influence from each other and that they both, again, obviously coexist together and that culture and the economy kind of drive each other one way or the other. And I'd say Andrew Breitbart once said that politics is downstream from culture. And I think that's a perfect representation of the fact that these two things are connected. And just an example of that is even so Marxists. They completely focus on the culture. They target the culture, try to make it more secular, try to take religion out of people's lives. and make them more morally isolated in the culture and more dependent on the government, which then leads to what they want to be an economic takeover. So these things all go together, and conservatism, standing on faith and on freedom, has to include the faith and the freedom and the economy to be successful, and it can't just be one or the other.
Yeah, it's a rational understanding that, like you said, that culture is the main influencer, but then, okay, we know that the economy is so important,
Of course.
and they will interact with each other. The survey results were widely distributed again. Majority of people, though, disagreeing, saying that, okay, you can't say the economy is just hand-in-hand more important than culture. But then again, we do have about 28% saying that it is more important, or at least that, even if these are not conservatives saying this, but from the opposite side of the table, they say, yeah, I think conservatism says that. I don't think that I would love to get more like data, because I don't think that this is like a really accurate representation of what conservatives believe. I'd love to just do a straight poll of, okay, we want Grove City students. What do you guys think about this statement? And maybe that's a great opportunity for the podcast here to do.
And I think, too, like on top of that, I would say for conservatives as a whole, I think the conservative movement focuses a lot more on the economy when marketing and just in the things that we maybe care about the most. And I think that the movement as a whole kind of forgets about culture sometimes, or forgets about, like, I'd group in the education system, which has largely been taken over by the left. I think, like, those kinds of things we've kind of let slip a little, and that's honestly what's going to be the downfall for the conservative movement in the end, if we just let culture slip, because that really is a cornerstone in our society.
The bright part of that, which I think our generation is doing so well, and why we both kind of, I think we say the conservatism future is bright, is that our generation really recognizes this this lack of concentrated efforts towards the culture, and we want to change that in our lifetimes. And so building upon that is that we understand when we work towards the culture, we have to be centered in our faith. And that will stem from judeo-christian values, which is the fifth question that says conservatism is built on judeo-christian values.
A lot of agreement there.
That makes me happy that at least that is an understanding across the board from all our respondents, that it was a little over 50% agreed that, and then majority, 24%, said a 10 out of 10. They said, yes, it's absolutely built on Judeo-Christian values. And then here, especially at Institute for Faith and Freedom, we are living example.
It's in the name,
this. Exactly. And I would just like to know, like, how has this influenced you in your kind of work within the conservative movement?
Yeah, well, I would say my faith is certainly my cornerstone. It's what grounds me. So my faith is really the most important thing before politics or anything else in my life. And from that stems conservatism, I think, from my faith, and figuring out, well, what's the best, way to live? What's the best way our country should be run? What are the best policies, leaders? So I think it all stems from faith, and that freedom and faith do walk hand in hand. And that's what falls under conservatism, because I think freedom without faith is misguided, and that we really need those to pair together. So for me, my faith has everything to do with conservatism and in politics and in all parts of life, because I think conservatism is a lifestyle more than it's even an ideology. It's about culture. It's about the economy. It's about religion. It's about the way you live your life. It just encompasses all of those things together.
Very well said. I like that on a large part. And I would just add that when you add the faith aspect into the politics, you really get this enduring moral order that conservatism, or at least the founders of conservatism and like lead influential writers like Edmund Burke, or like I said, Russell Kirk, they understood that Christianity has such an overwhelming influence upon this political movement known as conservatism versus any other ideological movement like either liberalism. And so it makes it such important, and it almost is the key of like success, I think, of what drives conservatism. And we a lot of times at these events like CPAC, okay, conservatism is a broad tent, but if we don't take lead as Christians and we don't lead as an example, then I really think like any other ideology, it can become a dead faith, and so to speak. And I don't know what is your experience kind of working within the political realm of those who call themselves conservatives but don't have this guiding principle.
Yeah, I think the disconnect there comes in with social issues and culture, which again, as we talked about before, are really, really important and foundational in conservatism and in, again, the direction that the country goes, and in faith and things like that. So I think that's where the disconnect is there. And I think, again, we should keep it a Big Ten. And, if people want to be, again, on the right more and advocating for economic policies, whether it's just fiscal conservatism or whatever it is, I think we should keep Big Tent, but also recognize, again, that true conservatism at its core has freedom and faith hand in hand.
Yes, overwhelmingly agree. And like we said, we do want this Big Tent to be occurring because we understand that we need everybody to get kind of our ideals across the board and to push this bright future that we would like.
But true conservatism, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or just maybe, like I like to say, who's going to lead the movement? Mm-hmm. Who's going to lead by example? Is it going to be someone who doesn't have,
that's a great point.
Yeah,
it really is.
Even a non-Christian, like many of my friends, can live great moral lives and have great ethics. But we understand by human nature, and our understanding is okay, certain events are going to come up or certain obstacles in life are going to happen. And whatever is a bedrock of your life and those moral principles, you're going to refer to. So if you are at the center of that reasoning, I think history tells that man or just humans are going to fail. Mm-hmm. And so the one thing that we know is time-tested is that these judeo-Christian values stand the test of time.
And those even beyond conservatism, it's just America's founding and the principles in which our country was founded on. And obviously conservatism aims to preserve those, but those founding principles of our country, I think, are really important and have been instrumental in the success of our country.
Absolutely. And so I know we only have probably time for one or two more. So I wanted to go on to this last one is that how often do you attend church? And this is kind of just a fun thing to look at rather than talk about and kind of dissect. But really surprising that 54% said they went once a week.
And maybe that's this crowd too, because obviously, throughout the world and our country, I think church attendance has gone down significantly, which is sad. But something I think the church needs to figure out, why is this and how can we change it?
Mm-hmm. And then we have, so standard deviation is about 7, and then we have 14% saying they never gone, which I think is pretty accurate. I thought that percent would be a little larger. Mm-hmm. But then looking back at kind of the answers, it makes sense that a lot of these respondents understood that if we go back to the conservative Christian values or we go back to the economy, saying that that's more important than the culture. And so it does reflect, I think, that, we do have our respondents are an audience that understand these ideals and they've been kind of brought up at least, or they go to attend church, and these ideals are reinforced daily or weekly in their lives. Mm-hmm. And so is there anything else you'd like to say? I'm going to wrap it up kind of soon.
Yeah, I think, again, even closing, to just remember that I really think it is a bright future, again, if we make it one. And I think there's a lot of potential. And we can see so many different conservative organizations, so many student organizations, a big online presence growing. I think really through that and just through our advocacy, I think there's really a lot of hope for the future.
Mm-hmm. And you yourself are leading the front.
Well, you too, Aaron.
All right, both of us, and including Libby, and many more at Grove City College even, or involved at CPAC, are taking this step forward in our generation. Gen Z, I dislike saying that, comes out of my mouth, but Gen Z is doing, I think, a good job, and we understand that, we're in this social aspect of social media or anything, and so we're going to thrive, and that's why the future of conservatism is bright. Please check out Conservative Grace on Instagram and Twitter. And then also subscribe if you have not. If you hit the bell up top, you'll get notifications for each podcast, including this episode, and then any other videos that are coming out. And then also to plug, we have student fellow applications coming out really soon. So get a look at that for any Grove City students. And then please hit the like down below. And Grace, thank you for coming, filling in. We really appreciate you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, y'all.
For more information on this podcast or other programs, please visit faithandfreedom.com.